Hello and welcome to Finextra TV. I'm Hannah Wallace and we're here at NextGen Nordics in Stockholm. With me now, stepping away from the busy event, is Beju Shah, head of the Nordic Centre, the BIS Innovation Hub, Bank for International Settlements. Beju, thank you very much for taking the time out of the event.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Really good to have you on, and I'm excited to hear a bit more about the BIS Innovation Hub. So tell us, what's the overall work you do and what support do you offer to the central banks?
BIS Innovation Hub is a really unique offering amongst the central bank community and allows us to focus on technology developments and also how they apply not only to central banks but also to the financial system at large. We're able to experiment, try, test, fail, and in failure there is learning. And then share that back with the central bank community. But it also allows us to help that community keep pace with the developments in technology, cybersecurity, and all these big questions facing us right now. The Innovation Hub typically focuses on 6 areas, central bank digital currency being an obvious one, next generation financial market infrastructures, which is obviously the theme of this event, RegTech and SupTech, cybersecurity, open finance and green finance. And we have a number of projects in all of those areas. The Innovation Hub is 7 centres around the world, plus a partnership centre with the New York Fed, and that covers Switzerland, Singapore, Hong Kong, London, Stockholm, the Eurosystem, and then Toronto later this year. And across that, we're almost around, we'll be around 80 to 90 people really driving innovation through the central bank community. And with all the work that we're doing now and all the changes that are happening, we need to be able to work in collaboration together. And often some of that work is best done in a central way that we can then disseminate it to the community, and that really advances everyone together in the same way.
Well, it's fantastic to have you here with us at NextGen Nordic. I know you've had a busy event so far, already been on a panel session. But let's talk more about the work that you're doing, because I know you've got some interesting recent projects around CBDCs and financial market infrastructures. So could you go into a bit more detail around those?
So my centre in Stockholm is doing some groundbreaking work in each of those areas. We focus here on central bank digital currencies, next generation financial market infrastructures, as you mentioned, cybersecurity, and soon some green finance projects. Right now, we've had 3 flagship projects on that are really exciting. The first one is Project Aurora. That looks at the nature of the challenge around money laundering and other financial crimes, and looks at it from a data point of view. And the conclusion that we've come to is actually what we need to do in order to better combat money laundering, using the latest technologies, is to take a data-driven approach to combating it in a cross-institution and a cross-border manner. What that involves is actually looking at the type of typologies and the techniques that are used, most of which are cross-institution and cross-border, treating it as a data problem and saying, well, actually, in order to do this and contrast that with the current approach, which is in a more siloed fashion, we need to be able to share information. And so technologies like privacy-enhancing technologies can help with that, to ensure that that information can be shared in a private and secure way. We then apply machine learning and network analytics over that encrypted data to learn around what the patterns that could be detected, and the ultimate aim is to then find those networks and flows that go across institutions and borders, which don't happen as effectively as they don't happen right now. If we're able to do that with those latest technologies, and bear in mind this is a simulated version, we give platform to that and awareness to actually you can use this to drive a different outcome and drive more effectiveness in the capture. And ultimately, when you pass that on to the people that are interested in that, policymakers or others, it could drive change to say, actually, there is a better way, we can apply this, and maybe beyond this round, we can then scale that into something a bit more real world, where you can start teasing out other issues around data protection, some of the legal challenges, and also answer questions like, okay, when we encrypt data, sensitive data, is it still PII data or not? So there's some big questions that we need to answer, but right now we're focusing on, can we go from A to B and see that network and flow? So really powerful, and we'll be publishing the report in the next few weeks.
Really
Project Polaris, focusing on CBDC, is another really groundbreaking project. I've been working around CBDC for several years, and what's always really bothered me and really important to me is these big implementation type questions, because there's a huge amount of complexity involved with CBDC. No one's really reinvented money before. So we really need to get into some of that. So we focus on secure and resilient CBDC systems, online and offline, which is a broad and deep topic. Part of that is exploring how offline payments with CBDC could be provided. So we've developed a handbook that's going to be published again in the next few weeks to help central banks understand all the complexities and the types of technologies and risk and design criteria for how they might think about providing offline payments. And that will vary by country or region, but the intent is to provide that. And some central banks view that offline payments is important for resilience reasons, some view it for financial inclusion. Mm-hmm. It also provides a way to ensure that CBDCs can resemble cash or adopt some cash-like features. It's not going to be the same as cash, but it will inherit some of those properties. But also, for some central banks, it could help ensure some privacy goals too. The other part of Project Polaris is that we've developed a cybersecurity and resilience framework. And the idea behind that is that those two key aspects are key to ensuring trust in a CBDC system. And we must be designing the technology, but also the operations for a central bank or the broader ecosystem with that from the outset, because you can't retrofit it. But it's also important to understand some of the new things that might be required for CBDC systems and also some of the threats out there. So this framework will allow central banks to map what they currently do, those existing robust practices they do, but also assess the maturity, what might be required for CBDC, and also identify new capabilities that might be required to run and operate CBDC systems. And lastly, we'll also be publishing a threat modelling gaps, a cyber threat modelling gap report to help central banks identify new threats that might occur when they use new technologies or newer technologies for CBDCs, because some of that hasn't been really explored yet. And between that whole work, we start really advancing the real practical questions that will come up as central banks edge towards implementation of CBDC systems, if they do go ahead. Sure. So we need to get that on the table now. And the last project that we did was Project Icebreaker, which was a collaboration between the Riksbank, the central banks of Norway, and also the Bank of Israel, and ourselves, where we did a first of its kind retail cross-border CBDC test. Now, the purpose of that was to see how you can connect different CBDC systems based on different technologies together. And in this case, 3 different DLT systems were used, and to see how you could interlink those and perform a cross-border retail CBDC test. Some of the key messages, I would say, coming out of that were that central banks can choose whatever technology they like. The interoperability will require, there's minimal requirements to making sure that you can enable cross-border, so implementing conditionality or hash time locking type mechanisms. But you also need 24/7, 365 operations. But it also importantly enshrines the role of the private sector in there, where actually there is a role for FX providers and PSPs and everything else, contrary to some of the popular debate. And I think that's very powerful in terms of proposing a different model. Now, the icebreaker may not be the thing that's used, but what it has done is allowed central banks to allowed us to communicate to central banks that actually you have some freedom around the technology choices, you do, and that's actually, these are the minimal things you need to implement, and actually to enable cross-border payments, these are some requirements you may be required to do. And then one of the unique things about Project, we explored conditional settlement, we also explored the use of bridge currencies.
All right, well, thank you so much, Beju. You've covered a lot there, and you've certainly got your hands full. Just focusing on the CBDC, just because it's prominent on the NextGen Nordics agenda. What's your outlook for this space, and is there any advice you'd like to end on?
So there's still no sovereign decisions taken around CBDCs, but we are exploring and informing. And so at this stage, as we edge towards implementation type conversations, and I've said this at other conferences too, we need to engage the ecosystem much more and have that public-private collaboration to understand what things central banks and other things should be thinking about from an implementation, retailer point of view, what the banks think, PSPs think, and so on, to understand actually user adoption, the implementation challenges, the cybersecurity and resilience challenges. All of that requires a very holistic discussion, so that's the first point. I think I would say is the more we go deeper into the work, and this is certainly what I've learned over the years of working on this, is that the more we unpack and learn, the more there is to learn. And actually, for something as important as money and payments and the way that it can impact society, my personal view is that actually slow and steady wins the race, that actually something this important requires full engagement and across the ecosystem, and to ask the questions and also challenge ourselves. And some of them will be difficult, and different people have different opinions, and there will be hearts and minds that will need to be won. So some of it will require education, some of it will require also engagement as well. But one more point is also to continue with the experimentation, because answering one question leads to more questions, and actually we need to continue to experiment to make sure that whatever is built, if it is built, is implemented correctly and works for all of society. And whatever, CBDCs must work for all of society. And that's the last point I want to make. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Beju, some really good advice to end on there. As we've been speaking, I think they're getting ready for the next break. But look, thank you very much,
Thank
and
you.
enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you.